Okay, there we go. So welcome to the launch of the Roy Fisher Archive newsletter, which is a prelude to a bigger launch of the archive itself once COVID blows over and we can return to normal, even entering libraries. Roy Fisher's archive was welcomed into Sheffield Special Collections last year, and Rare Books librarian Amanda Bernstein has been busy working closely with Sukey Fisher and Peter Robinson, cataloguing the extraordinarily rich archive. And Amanda will give you a glimpse of that later with her talk. But I just take this occasion to thank Sukey Fisher for her wonderful generosity as the state. As the state, she's been instrumental in forging the link with Sheffield and doing such hard work arranging the transfer of the archive as well. So I think Sukey has a few welcoming words. So I'll just sort of hand over to you, Sukey, just for those words.
It's a pleasure, thanks very much. Sorry, I'm almost losing my voice. I've spent about the last 4 years on Zoom, I think. Partly, it's lovely to see so many, well, friendly faces to me and more friendly faces to Roy. This kind of archive and meeting had to have a sensible title, but it has a subtitle because whenever Roy got to sort of run the band for a night or just, you know, run the words, the title was invariably simply Roy Fisher and Friends. And actually that says an enormous amount about how he worked, because although he was essentially a very solitary writer, always a group of buddies, you know, and there were very long friendships, and they were very deep. And in a funny sense, they were not very demanding, but they were always there. And they were beautifully fed things. So I think this is a very nice legacy to be meeting here. I'm very glad to, so please think of this as the last Roy Fisher and Friends night, or maybe the first new one. I'm particularly glad, there are lots of reasons I'm very glad the archive's in Sheffield, partly because, you know, it is a very high quality professionally run archive, of course. And because, again, same thing, if you've lived your life working among posses, there are many, many connections in the Sheffield collection already and will, in the course of time, be more. And also, just to flag up a very important fact, which is that Roy was a Birmingham poet for less than half his career. He was a Derbyshire poet, sometimes regarding Birmingham and sometimes regarding a lot else. But I think it's a very important statement for his work going forward, as it were, that he is very much more than the poet of Birmingham. The other thing, since I've got such a good and erudite gathering, can I just leave a question on the floor for you quickly? As I've gone through the archive and the various other things I've been left. Sorry, also with an extra thanks I should do now to Geraldine and to Alan, who were wonderful in going through the collections of books that were left, and to Amanda for everything. The thing that had the most powerful emotional effect on me was hearing the recording of City for the first time in very many years. And I felt I'm actually hearing my father's voice again. Now, that might sound weird because until, 4 years ago, on the solstice 4 years ago, I was hearing it every day. But he had this extraordinary change in middle life. I think few people have had such an explicit invention. And he edited himself, he edited his voice, he edited some of his dialect use, which he used not to have. And he was trying to do this enormous connection with, somewhat with Birmingham, somewhat with past. This is all in the build up to Furnace. And it was as though he had to edit a lot of things out. He changed his piano technique almost entirely and became a very different and really very much better pianist. And, you can follow this through a lot of things. I'm really interested in understanding, it's not a fault line, it's the opposite. It's an incredibly necessary sort of rebirthing, but it's very explicit. And looking around faces, I think most people have probably come from around that time or just after. A few from before. I know FLEUR kind of joins around the time of the Great Transition, really. I'm wondering how that lands on the page in the work and how clear those changes are. To me, they're not particularly, but I'm not a professional poetry reader. So anyway, let me leave that on the floor and the great impact that hearing his old voice made, which was much, much uneasier than his voice later in life. Thank you very much. Welcome. Enjoy the archive.
Thank you so much, Sukey, and just again for your wonderful generosity and also the importance of the archive in tracking the great changes that his work underwent over a very long life amongst words. I just to quickly thank Amanda Bernstein for her wonderful cataloguing of archive once it arrived, more broadly for the exemplary role building up the small press collection, which is such a nurturing poetry environment there in the archives. Thanks, of course, to Peter Robinson, who's worked so tirelessly as a scholar and champion of Roy's work over the years, who, as literary executor, has been such a meticulous and loving curator of the work, textually and materially, with editing the work, Roy's work, also editions of criticism, thing about Roy Fisher, News for the Ear, etc. And the editions of the work include the occasional prose, a slacky, and a furnace as well. Thanks to Alan Horsey and Geraldine, who did so much to help with the logistics of the archive getting here to Sheffield, but more importantly for the generous gift by both Alan and Geraldine of their archives to Sheffield, complementing Roy Fisher's archive so well and creating, along with the substantial small press collection, a wonderful hive of poems, artworks, weird objects, correspondence, and publications. The first issue of the Roy Fisher Archive newsletter is out now as an online journal. I'll put the link into chat, and has a welcome piece by Sukey Fisher, a description of the holdings by Amanda Bernstein. In addition, some aphoristic notes by Roy contained in the notebooks for a furnace that have been edited by Piette, and which included just amazing lines like identity is what can be thrown away, or the old mouths, the dead mouths insist on speaking. There's just extraordinary things. The newsletter ends with a close reading by me of entries in the Citizen notebook, edited and soon to be published by Piette, notebooks that were part of the complex genetic history of a city. We're very much looking forward, by the way, to the newsletter editors, to receiving contributions from the poetry community who engage with and love Roy Fisher's work. Please do get in contact with us with any ideas you have, or if you have correspondence or work by Roy you'd like to contribute to the archive, or you wish to offer readings of poems, do get in touch. I'll put our emails into the chat for you during the reading. I won't be officially introducing our contributors and poets. I'll just paste into the chat a series of bios for everyone who's contributing. I think we're here to celebrate Roy Fisher's work and the relationship of the poets contributors to that work. So we'll be concentrating on that. So the evening will be run with me just sort of quickly doing a white rabbit roll of just gluing voices together. The evening will run as follows. We'll start off with Geraldine Monk, which will be followed by readings by Geoffrey Wainwright. The form of it is that the poets read some of Roy's work and some of their work, which has some kind of relationship to Roy. After Geraldine and Geoffrey, Amanda Bernstein will give us a short talk about the Roy Fisher archive, its cataloguing plans for opening. And then Peter will be there as both a poet, so he'll be giving readings as well as talking about Roy Fisher's archival afterlife. And then we move to Angela Leighton, followed by Paul Muldoon, and then ending with FLEUR ADCOCK. At the end, if you do have any questions, do put them in the chat, and I'll just host those briefly for another 5-10 minutes right at the end. Okay, so moving on, we'll start off with Geraldine Monk.
All right, here we go then. I'm sort of like slightly nervous. I still haven't got quite used to the Zoom, the strangeness of it. So so I shall just go straight in without my usual waffle, which is probably a good thing, really. What I'm going to read from of Roy's is from the Dow Low Drop, and I'm going to read a little, which is like a little block prose passage from that. And I'm sure everybody here is completely erudite and also very up on the place names, etc., and they're Anglo-Saxon. But just in case there is anybody who doesn't know this, that a low, L-O-W, is a mound, and quite often these mounds have their hinges or have barrows on, so that they're prehistoric burial places. And so you're going to get, there's going to be a few laws in here. So this is what I'm saying, L-O-W, law. And this little section is actually written from Roy's house in Staffordshire, in fact, Derbyshire, Staffordshire. It seems to, you know how it weaves in and out, whichever side of the River Dove you are. In fact, there's a lot of places out there, they seem to claim both counties. So this one is Staffordshire because it's in the first line of here. So here we are in darkest Staffordshire, and this is about the environments of the stunning place where Roy lived. So go along and over the level last ridge of the Staffordshire mudstone above Longnaw, and the limestone starts up at you from the Dove, a ragged barricade of tall crooked points and green humps. The turnpike dives, kinks to cross the river by Lost Soham, vasta est. Far enough north to be harried. The manors along the Dove wasted, then, after King William's days of deep speech, listed. Beyond the river, the road heads up through the barrier, on the bed of the vanished feeder stream that tapped and emptied the shallow sea's last lagoon. On the rocks, at the grassy lake floor's edge, I'm living in a house built as a publican's retreat.
Huh?
And across the lake,
That's why you keep busy for 1 hour, Grace.
And across the lake, the waste cold Dowlamore rises high and quick to the first true edge of the limestone upland, and the skyline that joins Hindlow, Briarlow, Dowlow, Hordlow. Illusion, the set tilted with its bushes, walls and crossing cows, and cutting off at the sky, where the national park stops dead also, fresh out of scenery. There's no backside to download. A straight cut, quarried down hundreds of feet to the floor, below base level, the immense abyss of jobs. From the rim, a view over all the fields to the east, greened with their own dug lime, sieved in their mother's milk, cratered at Tunstead, Doveholes, Topley Pike, with more prints of new Eleusis. And apologies for some strange sort of editing, I think there. I just got a couple of words wrong, but I was somewhat thrown by the impromptu racket that went on in the middle. And I don't know if anybody else can hear it, but there seems to be this incessant, like a kind of car backing, that noise. Can you, is it just on my machine?
I don't think we can hear that, Geraldine.
No, okay.
I can.
Right.
I can hear it, yeah.
Yeah, it's finding it
Going on all the time.
slightly distracting. I can't quite know what it is, but well, it's not in here anyway. So anyway, to continue. So this was this is my poem that I wrote for Roy, and as it turned out, I didn't write it on the back of that. What I did was I wrote this after a visit to the house, and it was after when Sukey contacted Alan Halsey, who also just happens to be my husband, and so we went off into up to Roy's about the books, because Alan used to deal in books, and he keeps saying he's retired from that. I'm not sure if he has, but at the time he hadn't. So we went along to help Sukey sort out some of Roy's collection. Or I said we, I didn't. I don't know anything about such things. I just went for a walk and had a talk to the cows and things like that. It was a stunningly beautiful day. And the sky was blue with little scuddy clouds. And of course, you've got this absolutely amazing view of the Dragon's Back and all these limestone features. And I was looking out the window, and the windows were really, I mean, obviously it'd been empty for some time by then. And I was looking at this is in Earl Sterndale, by the way, if anybody wants to know where this is. And it seemed to me that what was happening, there's a lot of quarries around there, and a lot of the henges and laws, the prehistoric, they're all quarries now. I won't say anything about the dukes and duchesses of Devonshire, but it's mainly them that belongs to them. And so they've dug up quite a lot of our prehistoric history. And so as I'm looking out the window, it's actually quite full of a lot of sort of streaks, the windows, these massive windows. And it just seemed to me quite pertinent somehow that this idyllic view was being, it had this sort of industrial sort of sludge that was sort of forming a veil between me and this fantastic view. And it just seemed, I thought there was something very Roy about it, actually, that you've got that rural and you've got that urban or the industrial, and they were both meeting in this seemingly idyllic place. And I think in his bit he does say illusions, and there is a kind of illusional quality to it. So anyway, this as as Alan was doing his work and working out books, I was sort of more or less just hanging around, looking at views and having a great time. So this is the view from Four Ways, which is the name of the house. I stare out your window after you've gone. It needs cleaning. The dragon's back, racked with curvature of spine, is further distorted by downward streaks of pollution. White peaks smear the pane, dribbling the last gasp of our industrial past. Emissions. If the day were not so bright, it would be seen deep with the yellow of cowslips. I palm a filbert of your words, grid your view. The walled garden is going forward without you. It's a time thing. Moments slither into past, arbor low, dow low. The near breath of the I will get this one, Ouroboros tickles the nib, teeth nibble of tail, the smell of it. This place imbued with huge winged shadows. This place where star-scratched dark glows fearless. That's it. I'm sorry for such an absolutely bloody crap reading. I don't know what's wrong with me. I think I'm lacking a bottle of bloody wine. Can't say it. I said to Alan, why don't I turn down the sign and you shout out that bloody rotten word? I can't say it. Why did I even put it in there? Stop writing words I can't pronounce.
You robber us.
All together now. Who said it?
Me. You robber us.
All right. So I've got Ouroboros. That's it, Ouroboros. Right. I didn't do it after all. Anyway, there we go. I'll hand on to somebody more competent than me, which isn't going to be very difficult at this rate. But it's a lovely occasion, so I did my best.
Thank you, Geraldine, for your filbert of words, and it was fantastic to hear. Okay, sort of moving on to Geoffrey Wainwright now. If you could unmute yourself.
Yes, here I am. Hello everyone. I just want to read two poems. One of them, one of my favourite poems of Roy's, and then a short poem that is in memorial, really. The poem of Roy's that I want to read is from Peter Robinson's edition, an unofficial Roy Fisher, and it's a prose poem, Uncle Jim's Will. This is the last will and testament of me, Uncle Jim, being in my right mind on the 14th of October, 1934. All statements previously made by me regarding my death are hereby cancelled. Any additions, codicils, other wills, etc., I may make in the future are to count for nothing, whatever they may say. I wish my body to be cremated after my death as soon as possible, without any religious ceremony or songs or music of any kind, or any person of my acquaintance in attendance or nearby. Any ashes to be thrown away at once. I particularly wish my dentures and spectacles, if worn, to be disposed of immediately subsequent to death by way of the ordinary rubbish collection bin, and not to be tried for size at that time by anyone at all. My clothes, collars, boots, etc., to be sold for a decent price, at once without exception, the sale to be conducted by a suitable newspaper advertisement without any personal particulars. I bequeath, supposing the articles to be still in my possession at my death and still of use, number 1, All goods not specifically mentioned here below to my wife Doris Mary, if living. If not living, to my mistress, Lois Ivy Thompson. If both not living, the goods to be divided fairly between the remaining beneficiaries below listed, and the remaining by the clergyman of St Andrew's Church, Bowman Road, Capon Heath, or of any other church agreeable to those concerned. If I have, before death, for any reason married a second time, this last procedure to be followed, notwithstanding. Number 2, my hunter watch with chain and my army field glasses in leather case to my brother Will or his heirs. Number 3, my private collection of photographs, books and magazines kept in the attic of the house, 17 Livingston Road, in metal toolbox under the dumbbells, to my wife, to be divided equally or as she thinks fit with my eldest son, Horace. Hers to be the first choice in any event. Number 4, also to our son Horace, the copy of my birth certificate, mounted and framed in a mount and frame made and embroidered by my mother at her lying in. Number 5, my certificate, 1916, of unfitness for military service to be to the Imperial War Museum. 6, my mistress Lois Thompson to my second son, Kenneth, without responsibility for maintenance. Number 7, the stethoscope left at the house by Dr. Dan in 1927, immediately prior to his fatal collapse and accident, to my dear little nephew, Roy Fisher, to be kept in trust by his mother. 8, any monies whatever remaining in my savings deposit account to my daughter, Lillian, provided only that she undertakes to wear her glasses on all necessary cage times. My sword stick, number 9, to my youngest son, Stuart, also any protectives remaining from the bulk order made last year, 1933, i.e. buff packages packed into smaller tea chests in attic of 17 Livingston Road. Also any of same or other personal articles in my pockets at death. 10, my bitch Lucy to the Capon Heath Canine Home in perpetuity and to be buried there. 11, my BSA Roadster bicycle with box of spare handlebar grips, also the dumbbells in the attic of 17 Livingston Road to my sister Edith for her disposal as she wishes, or the use of her friends. 12, the picture wedded by Lord Leighton, print, to Mrs. Cooper, Capon Heath Post Office. 13, the set, as new, of croquet mallets in the shed at 17 Livingston Road, bequeathed me in the division 1913 of my Uncle Will's property on his death to my brother Will or his heirs for the name's sake. 14, the set of hoops and ball bequeathed me with the above to my dear little nephew Roy to go with the stethoscope. Witness my hand this 14th day of October 1934. Signed, Uncle Jim. And now this short poem that is written in memory of Roy, and it's called Two Pianos. I am listening to Renato Solani, piano, who has the softest touch, sometimes so close to silence. Solani at lunchtime, the gnome of my funny Valentine. The sun strong through the window, his cigarette smoke hanging in the light. And I am put in mind of an old friend, confined to his chair, looking at Earl Sterndale in the mirror above his mantelpiece. He can see enough from here, he says. He paid attention. The thing about them both is the piano. For Roy, that and poetry, the codes of rhythm. To their innermost, of course, I was not privy. That's all. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Geoffrey. That's wonderful. We'll just move on now to Amanda. Amanda Bernstein, who will be saying a few words about the archive. Amanda?
Yes, am I on? My connection keeps dropping, so I'll try and get this all in before I disappear again. Those readings were wonderful, so thank you very much. I really enjoyed both of them. I'm thrilled that there are so many people here today as well, to welcome in the newsletter and to say hello to Roy. I just wanted to give a quick update. I've written an introduction to the archive in the newsletter, which you'll be able to read. But I just wanted to go back to what Sukey was saying about how Roy Fisher had so many long friendships and so many long correspondences that lasted for many, many years, 20, 30 years. And I did make a note of a few of them when I was thinking about what I was going to say to you all. So he wrote many, many letters and received many letters back from Georgina Hammack, Jonathan Williams, Andrew Crozier, Simon Cutts, Ron King, Tim Longville, Stuart Mills, Stuart Montgomery, Tom Pickard, and Michael Shea, to name but a few of the over 400 correspondence in his archive. I suppose I'm glad that he didn't write any more, because together with all the other correspondences from the BBC, from his academic colleagues in America and in this country, it's just a huge archive of correspondence. That's the most
Yeah, I think we've lost Amanda there. We'll see if she manages to get back to us. You there, Amanda?
see.
Hi, Amanda.
Hello, yeah, sorry. See, I started waffling and this is what happened. It cut me off and said, enough of this rubbish. So I'm very sorry about that. Yeah, I did start cataloguing and I was almost, I'd say, over halfway finished, and then COVID happened. So we had to leave the library, and it was really, really frustrating because we were planning an exhibition for Roy's 90th birthday in this summer, which couldn't happen. But we've penciled that in again, that will go ahead in the summer of 2022, all being well. So I just wanted to let everyone know that there will be a big exhibition then. And you're probably all going to be invited. Let me see, 52, yeah, few, good. that's just enough people. So that's going to happen in 2022. And what I was going to also talk about reopening the archive, which is, we're still in partial lockdown, but we're reopening very, very slowly. We can't have external visitors in just yet, but we're presuming maybe toward the end of the summer or into the autumn, we'll be more likely to allow more people into the archive. But I can't tell you when exactly, but it will happen. So when I can get back to my desk, I'll finish cataloguing the archive, and I'll let everyone know via one of the next issues of the newsletter when you can come and consult it. But so in effect, I'm here to say, we've got this wonderful archive, but you can't see it. So very sorry, that's the message. But that won't be for long. That won't be for long. But if anyone wants to know anything about the archive or any of the content, then you can always email me, and I'll do what I can to help you. But hopefully I'll be able to welcome people soon. I think that's all.
Great, thanks, Amanda. And we should all owe you a tremendous debt for the fantastic work you've done on the archive already. I'll put the contact emails into the chat just now. So moving on to Peter.
Thank you, Adam. I want to just support the sorts of things that Amanda has been saying there by turning the lens a little bit onto what is there and the sort of things that can be done with it. The first thing that's coming out, as Adam mentioned, is a book called The Citizen and the Making of City, which should be coming out in the spring of next year from Blood Axe Books. And that publishes for the first time the original prose book that Roy wrote in 1959, and which he then cannibalized to isolate the prose sections in what became City. And that's been edited, and it's going to be published alongside, not exactly a variorum, because there aren't going to be exactly all of the variants, but samplings. For example, the migrant edition of City, which is very, very different from the definitive version, and also very interestingly, and never published typescript that was sent to Gail Turnbull and then returned at Gail's death, which is the largest version of City that I think he put together but then didn't use. Other things that can be done, I think, I've heard from a number of people, Roy Fisher fans, wondering about his what will happen to his poems, which have been left in a slightly odd state, partly through his own desire to reorganize them for the long and the short of it. But then Standard Midland was simply added onto the back of that, so that doesn't quite follow the principle. And then Slacky comes along with some of the latest poems and also some recoveries from the 1950s and 1960s. So if you add into those all of the poems that have been published on some occasions but not republished either in collections or in magazines, and then you add in the many poems that we've found in the archive itself that were never published, there's an elaborate editorial question about how to present Roy Fisher's collected poems, or even his complete poems, which is it's a daunting sort of thing even to imagine. Another thing that I think can be thought about is how to present Roy's collaborations with artists. The Sheffield Special Collections has, and it had before the Roy's archive arrived, collections of Ron King's and Ian Tyson's works. And it's one of the reasons why Roy Fisher's archive sits so well there, I think, because it is, as it were, among friends. But these works that Roy produced with the artists, in some cases are very, very difficult to represent. And two works that I know of, Cultures with Ian Tyson and Roller, which doesn't really have an artistic element, but it was designed by Ian Tyson. Neither of these works have ever appeared in the collected poems because they present such a kind of Oulipian problem of how to represent them on an ordinary page. So perhaps there's the possibility of a kind of art book there, which would properly represent the artworks and the creative writing, as it were, that went with them. beyond that, there's a vast amount of writing of journals and workbooks and so on. You get the impression from Roy's interviews and so on that he simply sort of followed his nose and had no ideas really about what he was doing and just waited until something came along. In fact, this turns out to be completely untrue. A furnace, for example, and this actually may be partly an answer to Sukey's question. A furnace has a very large notebook full of sort of process notes and ideas about what he's doing, all articulated in a way that you'd think from Roy's interviews that he never did that sort of thing, but in fact it was very much the opposite. Just to give you one tiny example of it, I've got with me here a notebook dated the 11th of July 2000 to the 17th of March 2004. And the very first entry in it is slightly piquant for me because it refers to the 3 books which were published in Roy's 70th year, 2 of which I had something to do with. The first of these was the first edition of the Interviews Through Time that Tony Fraser published with Shearsman. The second of them I edited along with Robert Shepherd, and that was News for the Ear, a collection of celebrations of Roy. And then there was the volume of essays that Adam mentioned as well that I edited with John Kerrigan called The Thing About Roy Fisher. And I think I've got a feeling that these 3 books may have been the first actual standalone volumes, as it were, devoted to him in his 70th year. And here's a page, just over a page of things that he wrote about it, in which of course I didn't read until after his death. Backwash from the 3 books. When Matchler, that's Tom Mashler of Cape Editions, when Mashler asked me for a collection in '65, I had to work through the summer to add enough items to the miscellany to make a book. It never occurred to me to reprint City, and it was only after Cape had rejected and Stuart Montgomery of Fulcrum Press was trying to bulk out the book that he came up with the suggestion of hanging the book on it. And that enabled me to discard elements in the Cape submission. Cape, I suppose, said no, because the MS had no handle, autobiography, war, whereas Stuart could see that City would provide one. So that was on the, he wrote that on the 11th of July, and then on the 11th of June, that's the day after his birthday, isn't it? On the 11th of June, he wrote that. And then on the 14th, a Wednesday, he wrote, that showed me, and there'd been the Sarah Golden New York Hall, for which I'd sent more or less the same miscellany of aesthetic bits, also obviously not published, that since I worked by following my uncertain nose and without strategy or ego drive, there we go, I was miles from where a publisher might be thinking. Then there is the matter of the principles of exclusion in 1968. So there's Roy Fisher reflecting on what it felt like to think back on his emergence in the middle of the 1960s, about 35 years later, when people had started writing and publishing books about him. And when it comes to the principles of exclusion for the collected poems of 1968, he wrote about that in his very wry note to the last book he published, Slacky, New and Neglected Poems, which contains a thing called a note on neglect, in which he says very wittily that he's not talking about the neglect that other people might have had for his works. He's talking about his own neglect for his own works. I'd like to just now read a short poem of Roy's and then a very, very short one of my own. This is a poem from 1979 in which I think he was discovering what the source of his inspiration in dark shapes or dark holes. He talks about it in the anti-biography, and he also, obviously, it's the core, the center of a furnace. And here in this little poem called Rudiments, I think we can hear him exploring it or discovering it in his childhood. Rudiments. One half-dark night, my father hoisted me, a 3-year-old illiterate, onto a parapet to look at a thing he called the barge, a pun of shapes from the prelude, as it turns out, deranged with long transmission and still a few years early for encoding in what were to be Clay's last paintings. Projecting motionless, down there between the bridge supports, there was a dead black V in the murk, gapped with its bad face upturned. Behind us, the biggest thing I'd ever seen, the dark gas holder, filled up the sky. One hot afternoon, he led me to a broken plank in a hoarding, then showed me, pointing straight down, the canal itself, a black, rippled solid made of something unknown and having the terrible property of seeming about to move far under our feet. I'd never seen so much water before. So when I was 60, Roy wrote me a little birthday tribute, not really tribute, you know, a little birthday poem called Bench, in which the kind of birthday present he gave me was, and this I think shows the warm but sharp edge to his mind and his wit. He gave me a piece of his mind. And I was brought up to write little thank you notes for gifts. So I wrote this short one and sent it to him. It's called Benchmarks. If you give me a piece of your mind, one looking or formed like a school desk, fissured with inscriptions, milk stains, that cracked varnish, nooks, crannies, hearts, tokens, marks of weakness, others' sorrow, where synapses built from attention wandered to drops as they blink in a rain pool, leaf mulch choking a gutter, or ripples on some surface water, thought concentrates until you find it and the world align. If you give me a piece of your mind, I'll use it for the peace of mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I show you enormous debt as well for carrying on the conversation with Roy's text and voice and warm and sharp presence over the years, and so that we can enjoy the pieces of his mind in the archive as well. Thank you. It's Angela Leighton now. Do you want to start with those photographs? Angela?
You could put them up very quickly if you wish, yes, yeah, and
okay.
I'll start talking.
Right.
Well, shall I begin?
Yeah.
In 2004, when I was still teaching at Hull, Roy Fisher came to give a reading with, as you can see, Michael Donaghy. It was actually just 2 months before Michael's tragic early death, but you wouldn't have guessed. We hosted a little party for them both in our garden beforehand, and the reading was then also out of doors. But it's my memory of Roy's total quiet composure, sitting by our pond's low wall that seeded my poem about him. I suppose I've always been fascinated by brick, the textures and the colours of it. So Fisher's extraordinary close readings of walls in his poems spoke powerfully to me. So today I'm going to read from the final part of The Return, from his great poem, The Furnace, which we've heard a bit about already. And it's the section which starts by asking, who shall own death? And then it tracks the returns of the dead from Lazarus through the imagination's many swing doors. And I'll just let the last line of that section lead into my own commemorative poem, remembering the little brick wall that Roy sat beside that day. Under that thunderous humbug, they've been persistently coming and going, of the pass and return valve between the worlds, not strenuous, ghosts innocent of time, none the worse for their adventure, nor any better. That you are dead turns in the dark of your spiral, comes close in the first hours after birth, recedes and recurs often. Nobody need sell you a death. The ghosts' grown children mill all day in the public search office, burrowing out names for their own bodies, finding characters with certificates, but no stories. Genetic behavior, scrabbling, feeling back across the spade cut for something, the backflow of the gene's forward compulsion, suddenly showing broken, leaked out, distressed. They come anyway to the trench, the dead in their surprise, taking whatever form they can to push across. They've no news. They infest the brickwork. Kentish Road, almost as soon as it's run up out in the field, gets propelled to the trench, the soot still fresh on it. And the first few dozen faces take the impress, promiscuously with door and window arches. Birmingham voices in the entryways lay the law down. My surprise stares into walls. Brick wall. Dear Roy, that day you came to read and stayed sitting by our pond's low wall, composed, considering. I seemed to hear the long hall waiting each word, the foot slog in it, driven so far beyond your first original reserve. Like hearing the quicks of grass harrowed deep in the earth. Dear poet of walls, man-made, high-baked, from Tigris, Jericho, Mohenjo-Daro, from Roban to red brick, piston, spray canned, scrawled by kids with immortal longings. Walls blocking long views beyond. How that dead acoustic, dead space seems an order to listen. Ordinary, oblivious. Walls are soundings. Are you there, Roy, where first I met you, in the walls of a poem, so close up to nowhere, with its shadowy depressions, mortared holes, reticulated lines of squared up pieces precisely arranged, and no conclusions, but just to take our improvisatory tastes by surprise? Are you there, among all the manifest departings, sightings inferred, where the hiding, see, the dead might transfer? Ghosted to earthworks, or pearled like tiny nodes of rain, sucked like damp into patinas of brick dust, whitish crystals. There a passing stare, unremarking, or rebound from nothing except the clay's absorbent afternoon warm. Now you've gone where the poor of Birmingham, the luckless, the bombed, the anonymous forgotten linger in the shady brickwork of your words. Those serviceable blocks marked by vanishings, arrested absences, stored with the formlessness of forms, retain the force lines of lives long lost, patched with lichen, topped with stonecrop. Old walls might still open a near view blank and prospect of shifting souls, those invisible drifters, apparent as daylight. Now you've joined them in the bricky exactness of a thing that remains immutable, finished, fired for cladding, impassably proof. Roy, you're for reading now, poems sounding what we don't think we know. Thank you.
Fabulous, Angela. Thanks a lot. It's superb on the shady brickwork of words.
I think it comes from being a northerner. I've always been fascinated by walls.
Fantastic. So next up, it's Paul Maldone. Paul, you want to unmute yourself?
Thank you so much. What a pleasure to be part of this. One of the things I love about this great poet is his capacity for the big close-up, the BCU, the long shot, the wide shot, the zoom, the pan, and he seems capable of somehow been able to entertain hobbies texts for a film, and it's the poem Birmingham River. I loved that image earlier on of his sense, as I think any decent poet has, of being led by his nose. And this is a poem about a river, I guess, that's somehow led by its nose. Birmingham River. Where's Birmingham River? Sunk. Which river was it? Two, more or less. History. We're on our tribal ground, where they moved in from the Trent. The first English entered the holdings and the bodies of the people who called the waters that kept them alive Ten, the dark river. These English spread their works southward, then westward, then always for 30 odd miles, up to the damp tips of the 30 odd weak headwaters of the Thames. By all of the Thames, they settled and sat, named themselves after it, Tom Seton. And back down at Tamworth, where the river almost began to amount to something, the Mercian kings kept their state. Dark because there's hardly a still expanse of it wide enough to catch the sky. The dark river mothered the black country and all but vanished underneath it, seeping out from the low hills by Dudley, by Upper Gornal, by Sedgley, by Wolverhampton, by Bloxwich, dropping morosely without a shelf or a race or a dip, no more than a few feet every mile, fattened a little from mean streams that join at Tipton, Bilston, Willenhall, Darlaston, Oldbury, Wednesbury. From Bestcott, she oozes a border round Handsworth, where I was born. Snakes through the flat meadows that turned into Perry Bar, passes through Whitton, heading for the city, but never getting there. A couple of miles out, she catches the timeless, suspended scent of Netchells and Saltley. Coal gas, sewage, smoke, turns and makes off for Tamworth, caught on the right shoulder by the wash that's run under Birmingham. Oh, petty river with no memory of an ancient name. A river called Rhea, meaning river, and misspelt at that. Before they merged, they're both steered straight in channels that force them clear of the gasworks. And the Thames gets marched out of town in the pleaced calm that hangs under the long legs of the M6. These living rivers turgidly watered the fields, gave drink, drove low-powered mills, shoved the Soho works into motion, collected waste and foul waters, gave way to steam, collected sewage, factory poisons, gave way to clean Welsh water, kept on collecting typhoid, sank out of sight under streets, highways, the back walls of workshops, collected metals, chemicals, aquasites, ceased to draw lines that weren't cancelled or unwanted, became drains with no part in anybody's plan. And I'll read a short poem which is meant to commemorate something of the subject matter, and I hope the spirit of Roy Fisher. I was amused to hear Peter use the word Fisher, F-I-S-S-U-R-E, in his poem, and this poem is no less punning, probably less effectively so. So anyway, great to be here today. Thank you so much for having us all. The Ice Fishers. The ice fishers on Bear Gulch Lake are happy to have been left on the shelf, though each has cut a foot-thick wedding cake. It's an unlikely form of spinsterhood to which they're almost completely resigned. Their poles are made of poplar wood. They're young girls mostly, don't you know? The ice fishers on Bear Gulch Lake have learned what's most likely to break the surface is some version of the self. It's an unlikely form of spinsterhood, in which they've learned what's best withstood the pressure is saw-toothed, three-spined, a fish armed with a crossbow. The ice fishers on Bear Gulch Lake are happy to have been left on the shelf in an unlikely form of spinsterhood, to which they're almost completely resigned.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was wonderful. On the dark river of history and geography in Roy's work and your witty meditation on water. Can we move on now to FLEUR, ADCOCK? You could unmute yourself.
Done. Yep. Thank you. It's amazing to be part of this dedicated and learned gathering. I'm really honoured. And I loved everybody else's poems. I would have loved to read Uncle Jim's will, but too late for that. So I'm going to read something different. I'm going to read two poems of Roy's. The first one is They Come Home, which was originally part of the text of A Furnace. And I'm reading from Peter Robinson's edition because he includes it as an appendix. It's also published in Birmingham River, but the print here is slightly easier for my eyes. And also it's interesting to read about the way it came about. Right. It's about what happened to the ashes of Roy's wife, Joyce's parents, after they brought them home. They come home. To win back the parents from the passage laws, bring them home together, bury them under a tree, spread their bone dust that now stares back at the sun for the first time, and not for long. Two colours of dry limestone, female and male, met for the first time, your fingers and mine mixing your dead in a layer across the topsoil set with corms, aconite and crocus, directly under a double-winged trapdoor of live turf. By no means separate the dead from anything. To have them won back by awkward custom, lifted free of the crematorium count from the poor vestige of common ceremony, left to our own devices, holding them, each in a stout paper bag that covers a square-faced container of dull plastic with a toning beige, coloured like milky cocoa with a toning beige lid. And the last journey of all, of necessity by way of the car exhaust workshop. They travel, your foot steadying them upright, together on the floor, concentrated, come down to owl size in their jars. And they stay there for an hour without us, lifted up high on the greased, shining hydraulic pillars under the workshop roof lights, closed in my grey-green car, while its rusted and burnt-out piping gets yanked off and replaced. They come home over a new smell of hot metal, by no means separate from anything at all. Jars and their paper bags, name labels go to the bin with the clearings out from the discontinued kitchen. Each has still a whisper of human dust that clings to the plastic, the boundary and mad regress beyond the microscopic. They're going again in a day or two, to be in part twice burned in city flames, 800 degrees of the lance burner, under the oven's brick arch, and then whatever blast of the municipality lifts the remainder haze clear of Sheffield and over the North Sea. I can't help seeing heaven in those shining hydraulic pillars under the workshop lights. Although not at all like Roy, I mean, everything he does, he tried to do was different, and in that he wasn't using finite verbs for some reason. He preferred to have infinitives halfway through. Right. And the second poem of his is his stunning little masterpiece for his son, Ben, who died in 2009, very short. On hearing I'd outlived my son, the linguist. 2 days since I heard you were gone, suddenly in your 40s and me still not quite 80. And hour by hour today, with no whole word, all the emptied patterns of your talk come crowding into my brain for shelter, bustling, warm, exact. You'd be interested. Well, follow that. I'm going to read 3 poems, most of them fairly short, from the selection I included in my new book, The Mermaid, a sequence of 12 poems for Roy or about him. And the first one was a commission by the magazine Magma for a series they were running called Presiding Spirits. You had to write a poem influenced by or based on the poem, a dead poet who was your inspiration. Mine turned out to be Milton. And Lycidas, of course, is a very obvious choice. And I begin with the first line of Lycidas, and the poem goes off on its own track with occasional little bits of Miltonic pseudo rhyme here and there. And it's called Dead Poet Society, which was the title of a series of emails that Roy and I regularly exchanged every time we read the latest grim contents of the obituary columns, saw more poets gone. Yet once more, O ye laurels, and once more, much like, I come to complain, though not for you, innocent shrubs. My target is mouldy old death who keeps grabbing my friends. I have some words for you, skeleton guts. You snatched more than your share of poets, crammed them in your long pack and carried them off to munch at leisure in your den. Why couldn't you have used some judgment? To you we may all seem much the same, but I tell you, boned face, today the life you had the gall to pluck, not untimely, he was old enough, but gifted with wits, with wit, with a brain that these witless times can't easily spare, was exceptional. It was Roy you took. Think of that if you can for a moment, goggle sockets, and repent. Yes, Roy, dear friend and matchless poet, Roy who has not left his peer. He and I kept a running correspondence to note each became your prey. Endless mailings headed another one. We were against you, as he managed to say to your face when you came fumbling for him. His last word, I'm proud to report, was fuck. And this one is an April bat. This was written fairly shortly after his funeral in 2017. From the place where you are now, you sent me a bat. Thank you. I looked out of the pantry window to catch a glimpse of the sunset, rosy pink with pollution as it was. And there, circling and flipping low above my flowering trees, apple and lilac, was this bat. Birds we used to send each other, a woodpecker, a jay. But this is for the dark time. Don't think I value it less for being a cliche. You know I haven't a very original. You were generous enough to send me a thing I'd understand. And finally, this is Porridge. I was thinking about that saucepan of yours, the Pyrex one, so improbable, made of amber glass, the colour of barley sugar. Not a utensil to be used on gas, I imagined, but on your electric cooker, it squatted contentedly in its glory. Everything about it looked precarious, liable to melt into golden syrup as soon as it encountered heat, or explode into a shrapnel blitz of orange splinters. But of course it was tougher than that, solid, quaint with survival from an earlier age. All you had to do was not drop it too hard. I almost felt I was demeaning it by stirring mere porridge in it, but oh, the glow. Now that the house is cleared, it must be somewhere, safe in a crate perhaps, or a cardboard box, until whatever happens to it happens. Thank you.
So, thank you so much for those. That was marvelous, very intimate and moving, and a fitting close to several poems of contributions dealing with Roy's intimate knowledge with mouldy old death. Thanks everyone for just a fantastic evening of reflections of poems and memories and reminiscences. It's just a great launch for the newsletter and for the archive once it's open. I didn't receive any questions in the chat, so if anybody wants to raise their hand, then we can actually have a conversation. Where was that? I've got a Tom Phillips says he lives in Bulgaria, and the great Bulgarian translator Alexander Shurbanov, himself celebrating his 80th birthday this week, published his translation of Roy's The Hill Behind the Town in his 1995 anthology of English poetry, which ranges from Chaucer to Dylan, Thomas and beyond, and still trying to find a print copy for the archive. In the meantime, if you look at it in the chat, Roy in Cyrillic. It looks beautiful. Yeah, so there's a question from Aggie. There'll be a publication for Roy, an anthology of some sort, creative and critical. That's an excellent idea. Let's use the newsletter maybe to make that happen. Thank you, everyone. Alex Went is interested to read for any archive recordings. Yes, and I think there's also, is there some recordings of his music making as well, which might be good to put up somewhere.
I know, funnily enough, with working through the jazz saxophonist Lol Coxhill's archive, I came across recordings he'd made with Roy. Weirdly enough, for I think it was a sort of, I'm not sure it was a sitcom, it was a TV program in the 1980s called Strangers. And I can't remember exactly whether it was a sort of cop show or something like that. And I know Lol was featured in it, and the soundtrack track was a jazz quartet, and Roy was the pianist in that. So I certainly have several recordings in Lol's archive. And also I came across a lovely copy of the Ship's Orchestra, which Roy had dedicated to Lol. It's also there in the archive. It's a lovely thing. But there are, I'd love to know if there's more recordings of Roy playing jazz.
Yeah. That might be a great place to let's say point the way to the recordings, or even to host them, the newsletter, because it's sort of online and therefore can have MP3s. So that'd be great to have that in one.
Adam, I've heard a recording of Roy doing a radio show, interviewed, and he performs songs with Ruby Turner doing the singing, which is really rather striking. And there are also some recordings of him playing with non-vocal jazz with a band that Sukey sent me, actually. So actually, I suspect there's quite a lot, and that this might indeed be another sort of archival recovery activity that we could do. We could actually put together some kind of album of Roy actually playing, which he was very shy about it. He was very modest about it, really. I mean, I think the impression I get is that he liked performing, but he didn't put it around in recorded form very much. Although, as you know, I think it exists, just to some extent anyway.
I think there might. I have a feeling Roy might be the pianist on that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, on that, can anyone hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Tim, yes, on that subject, I made a recording at Pentameters in Hampstead around 1980, just an amateur recording on my little tape recorder, but it has Roy on piano, obviously, and Jeff Nuttall on cornet, and it includes some very trad jazz, but Roy reading some poems as well. So I could make that available to the archive.
I can tell his recordings because, in fact, Don Henderson was the star, and Don Henderson had to wear gloves because he couldn't get his wedding ring off. And you'll find gloved hands, which are Roy's. And so he was Don Henderson's stunt double, and Roy was acting. I keep looking around anywhere to find recordings of the two of them together because Lol was a great mate and a lovely bloke. So I haven't got anything I'm certain about yet, but Lol took Roy to some very good, interesting places he wouldn't otherwise have gone to. There is certainly live New Departures bands. I think Roy had some problems with Horowitz kazoo playing, which was not that of a musician. The best recordings I've got are backing Kenny DeVerne, the American Reeds player, at the Old Hall Hotel Oldham early in the 1980s, which was where the big Americans tended to play if they were playing one gig in the North at that time. And that's kind of seeing his new technique come through. Whereas, you know, there's an early recording with the Second City Jazz Band, which is quite sort of barrel house piano-y, and it's what he was doing with the New Departures band. So he'd become a quite different musician. There's a good recording with Sheila Collier, who's a Manchester, was, I think she's still alive, living in Sweden. And she did a very good Bessie Smith tribute album, which has Roy playing piano on most of the tracks. But it's characteristic. All the best of his recorded work is actually backing somebody else, as in the Ruby sessions. He was at his best as an accompanist. He didn't like band leading because he just didn't. He was a very reactive musician.
Yeah, great. Mary is saying that she has few cassettes sent her over the years of him playing with Mel Hill, etc.
Yeah, I've got those. There's a sort of issue about, this is difficult. He had a lot of the sort of Stoke musicians were great. Roy's problem was they only knew about 6 tunes. So that's sort of Stoke-on-Trent disease a bit. But yeah, the Mel stuff is covered. It's a bit rehearsally, but it's here, and I've got that too. There's a very good Radio Stoke program, which Arthur Wood, who was an excellent producer and a very good jazz pianist, was the original pianist with Climax Blues Band. Arthur did a really good recording, which talks about Roy's techniques as a musician and his techniques as a poet and his original techniques as a graphic artist. And they were good friends. They talk closely. I've got a recording that Jane Woods cleaned up. So that's available too. That's probably one of the wisest little pieces.
Yeah, fantastic. Amanda suggests that we convert those recordings to MP3s and play them as part of the 2022 exhibition. That's a great idea. David Balbin has also mentioned the recordings of his readings. David Balbin shot a video of Roy's final reading, the shoestring press reading organised by John Lucas and Beeston's Flying Goose Cafe. So that'd be great to have linked through to from the newsletter as well.
I think that's on YouTube actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put it on YouTube, and I filmed all of the second half and a couple of poems from the first half with Roy's permission, from very close up on a cheap little video device, but it's come out reasonably well. And I think there are only 2 substantial videos of Roy on YouTube, sadly.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it'd be good to show those readings, the exhibition as well. Excellent. Peter, do you think, have you got anything you'd like to finish up with saying? Is Peter there?
Yes, there I am.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to say how enjoyable this has been, and thank you everybody who's come along and taken part. It's wonderful to hear all the poems read. I think that's the thing I've loved most is listening to the readings of Roy's work, but also the responses from others. And it's I'm just glancing over the chat as well, and it's fantastic to hear comments coming in from other people, and also the feeling that there might be a very large amount of material, of recorded material out there that could eventually be gathered together. I'm hoping that one of the things I think is there's a sort of issue about Poets Archives, which is that they get sent to Texas, or they get burrowed away in places, and then nobody ever looks at them. And I think that one of the things that I hope for Roy's archive, and perhaps for other poets' archives around the country as well, is that they get activated and that they become the centers for conversation and collaboration and ongoing conversations about the role of poetry in culture and society. That's my ambition for this, and I think we share it. I think we all share it. I hope we all share it. There we go. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Peter, and thanks to Geraldine, Jeffrey, to Amanda, to you, Peter, to Angela, to Paul and Fleur for just a fantastic set of readings. It really brought Roy's voice back, and a fantastic launch for this newsletter and the archive. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'll be closing shop now.
Thank you.